Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of Wills, Women, and Wealth. I am your host, Maryland attorney Elsa W. Smith, and I'm also the host of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us for another great episode. This podcast, as you know, is for women who value their health, their wealth, and the legacies that they are creating. Each episode is going to bring you interviews in the areas of finance, law, mental, and physical health, and so much more. I'll also share educational episodes that answer your questions on wills and estate planning topics. This is a community, so I want you to engage. So let's start growing together. Do you have a question or a topic that you'd like us to feature on Wills, Women, and Wealth? Contact us via social media or leave a comment. As a reminder, this and all future episodes will be available on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Now, on to the show. We receive calls at our office from adult children who want to start the estate planning process for their parents. They call and say, my mom needs a power of attorney, or my dad needs to create a will. And eventually, during the conversation, we learn that mom or dad may have trouble remembering things. And there are those cases when the caller, minimizes the severity of how this forgetfulness is impacting, the parent's daily life. The parent, him or herself, may be in denial of what is happening to them. So the reason that understanding all of this is important as an estate planner is because the documents like a power of attorney and a will require you to have capacity or to be of sound mind. Once the parent in this scenario has lost that ability or is experiencing some sort of, cognitive decline, it becomes a bit more complicated and potentially more expensive when we're talking about estate planning. So today, my guest is going to help us all better understand and, how to recognize and how to deal with cognitive decline issues. My guest is Dr. Carl V. Hill. Now, before I bring Dr. Hill on, I want to tell you a bit about him. Carl V. Hill is the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Alzheimer's Association, overseeing strategic initiatives to strengthen the association's outreach to all populations and providing communities with resources and support to address the Alzheimer's crisis. Dr. Hill previously served as the association's Vice President of Scientific Engagement. Prior to joining the association, he served as director of the Office of Special Populations at the National Institutes on Aging. Throughout Dr. Hill's 6 years in this role, he led the development of the NIA Health Disparities Research Framework, which stimulates studies focused on health disparities related to aging. He also directed the NIA Butler Williams Scholars Program, which provides yearly training for early career investigators interested in aging research. Dr. Hill earned his PhD from the University of Michigan School of Public Health, where he trained with the Center for Research on Ethnicity, Culture, and Health, and the Program for Research on Black Americans. He is an alumnus of the National Medical Fellowships Incorporated W.K. Kellogg Foundation Health Policy Fellowship Program. Dr. Hill holds a master's degree in public health from Morehouse School of Medicine, and he received its Distinguished Alumnus Award in 2019. As a member of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Public Health Prevention Service, a training and leadership program, he helped to establish the Center for Bioethics in Research and Healthcare at Tuskegee University. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome Dr. Hill to the Wills, Women, and Wealth podcast. Welcome, Dr. Hill.
Oh, so great to be here with you, attorney Elsa Smith. This is an exciting podcast. I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Well, I've been looking forward to it as well, to learning so much about the disease, and I'm hoping to really help the community. It's quite timely, particularly during Black History Month, that I have you on. So we're going to raise awareness and educate as many people as possible. So let's jump right in. Please tell us a bit more about your role at the Alzheimer's Association, and how did your professional journey lead you to work with the association?
I'd say it's a great question because, right now at this point in my career, I think all of my previous roles and academic training, were really, led to this type of opportunity to work with this type of organization. So in turn, in serving as a chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, I really get the opportunity to think critically about getting resources to communities that are underserved or disproportionately affected by Alzheimer's or another dementia, or underrepresented in clinical trials. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. So this is the culmination, I think, of all the training that you mentioned in my bio, where I've had opportunities to work with the National Institutes of Health, or to be trained by great scholars at the University of Michigan who were thinking critically about disparities among Black Americans, or working in public health, at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This all comes to this time, this opportunity for me, because the Alzheimer's Association has just a great opportunity and infrastructure with over 70 chapters all over the country, physically located, in communities, with the goal of engaging communities with resources like education about Alzheimer's and dementia, or support for caregivers, all sorts of resources for us to get to those that are disproportionately affected. And as we'll talk later, I'm sure we know African Americans are disproportionately affected by Alzheimer's or another dementia. So just really excited about this role. Thinking of diversity in the way that we think of it, diverse perspectives for risk, being inclusive, intentionally inclusive, and then equity. I tell you, Elsa, equity is what I think long and hard about, and that's how do we deliver those resources to African American communities in the ways that they can be best received, and that is our opportunity, that's our challenge, and that's what we think long and hard about every day.
And I'm going to ask you a bit more about that particular aspect later on. But first of all, I think we need to start with a foundational question. What is cognitive decline? What is Alzheimer's? And the follow-up to that is, do those, the triggers, do they differ among Black Americans and or communities of color?
Well, I tell you, from a foundation perspective, everyone who develops Alzheimer's or another type of dementia passes through mild cognitive decline, and that's when people have memory, slight memory problems, right? And so that really gives us an opportunity. We'll get into that later, because if we can diagnose people at the mild cognitive decline, or space of this, then we really have a chance at slowing the number of people who would develop Alzheimer's or another dementia, or addressing the disparities that we see for Black African Americans. But let's back up. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia that affects memory, thinking, and behavior, and is a progressive disease, and in which symptoms gradually worsen over time, right? So I use the word dementia, umbrella term for a number of diseases that relate to memory loss. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia,
Hmm.
a general term for memory loss, like I said. Alzheimer's disease, again, a type of dementia, accounts for 60 to 80% of all dementia cases, right? And so we also know that mixed dementia is prevalent as well. So there's another dementia called vascular dementia, which is
Hmm.
linked to various cardiovascular health outcomes really over the life course, and one that we'll discuss when we talk about the health of Alzheimer's and dementia among Black African Americans. But to take home, Alzheimer's accounts for 60 to 80% of all dementia cases, and it's really important to think about here, Elsa, is that Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging, right? We know the greatest known risk factor is increasing age, but it is not normal aging. And so the most common and early warning signs of Alzheimer's is difficulty remembering newly learned information. So as Alzheimer's advances, I said it was a progressive disease. It leads to increasingly severe symptoms, including disorientation or mood and behavior changes, deepening confusion about events, time and place, unfounded suspicions about family, and all of this varies, Elsa, because I tell you,
Hmm.
many people will tell you, caregivers will tell you that one case of Alzheimer's or another dementia is one case of Alzheimer's and another dementia. That's why it's so important to be able to receive a diagnosis and to be under a doctor's care as soon as a loved one sees warning signs for dementia.
Are there particular, um, I guess, and maybe environmental or societal factors that are maybe unique? I don't know if that's the right term to use and they serve as aggravating factors for people in the Black community.
Well, we know in general the strongest risk factors for the development of Alzheimer's or another dementia are older age or
Hmm.
family history of dementia and conditions that, as I said earlier, increase the risk of cardiovascular disease like high blood pressure or high cholesterol levels or unmanaged diabetes, right?
Mhm.
And so, chronic health conditions associated with higher dementia risk, really disproportionately affect also Black and African Americans, right? And so when we think about disparities, my training is in health disparities. We're really trying to understand, what are some of the factors over the life course that lead people to maybe engage in poor health behaviors that undermine their cardiovascular health, right? And so we look at things like a quality of early life education or higher rates of poverty, having resources to be able to afford a diet high in fruits and vegetables is really important. And then stress, greater
Mhm.
exposure to adversity over the life course. Sometimes it's workplace stress, maybe it's family stress, maybe it's racial discrimination, that people that African Americans have to cope with, and they turn to unhealthy behaviors that undermine cardiovascular health, which over time, can put African Americans at greater risk for developing Alzheimer's or another dementia, right? And so it's really important to understand, I think, when we say diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity is not only, who's at the table and who's not, but whose perspectives to risk, whose risk perspectives are we considering, and how do we intervene, which is really important.
A question came to mind as you were speaking, because as we're talking about aggravating factors, societal, environmental factors, the elephant in the room has been, this pandemic, COVID. Does the Alzheimer's Association research yield anything as to the relationship between the COVID pandemic and maybe a rise in people suffering from Alzheimer's disease?
Yeah, we saw a dramatic rise in deaths from Alzheimer's during COVID, and so more research is needed on the relationship between COVID and brain health. But some of that may be attributed to social isolation. We know that COVID led to people having to live in very isolated ways, or not being able to get the health care that they normally would have, or be with their caregivers, right? And so this is a research area that needs to be investigated further. But there was a rise in deaths from Alzheimer's during the COVID period.
Before I read your intro, I mentioned a situation that happens, often at my firm. We get calls from adult kids. Now, this question is specifically to them. What can, many of us who, my parents have since passed away, but at a time I was one of those adult caregivers. How can we, advocate for parents with signs of cognitive decline, and what should we, what kinds of tests should we be asking for when we go to the doctor with our parent?
Yeah, really good question. I tell you, ongoing and open communication with your doctor is important. When seeking a diagnosis for memory loss, ask questions. Really be intentional. Be prepared to answer questions. And it's really, there's a stigma, in our community around many diseases, but particularly memory loss, Alzheimer's and other dementia. So be prepared to be honest about, what you're observing among with your loved one in terms of, their potential warning signs, so that you can get a proper, diagnosis. So the first step, in following up on symptoms is finding a doctor you feel comfortable with. Many people, contact their primary care physician about their thinking or memory concerns, and primary care doctors often oversee the diagnostic process themselves. So, the doctor will evaluate your loved one's overall health, and identify any conditions that could affect how well memory, is being affected. And so, I tell you, when talking to your primary care physician about memory and thinking problems, ask how familiar, they are with diagnosing dementia, and whether there are circumstances in which they would, refer you to a specialist. So, really be prepared to have questions, and maybe have questions, listed, jot some questions down before, you get in that healthcare setting, so you can be prepared, right? And a few of the kind of providers you might encounter are a neurologist who specializes in diseases of the brain and nervous system, or a psychiatrist, who are, these doctors are trained in general psychiatry with additional training in mental health and aging, or a psychologist, right, who has special training and testing to assess thinking abilities, including memory, attention, language, reading, and problem solving skills. And then there's a geriatrician, who specializes in the care of older adults. And so just, coming to the healthcare system, to the diagnosis with questions and some background information could be very helpful for yourself and for the caregiving of for a loved one.
Should at what point would it be appropriate? I know some of these tests are very expensive, but if we like a brain scan, CT scan, what, on a practical level, what are the tests that at least would be helpful in giving a baseline, and then kind of continually monitoring that parent as they age?
Well, there's no single diagnostic test that can determine if a person has Alzheimer's disease. Physicians, often with the help of specialists like I named before, neurologists or neuropsychologists, geriatricians, they use a variety of approaches and tools to help make a diagnosis. Research is leading us closer and closer to a blood test. Not quite there yet. And then PET scans are used in research to see amyloid, in the levels of amyloid in the brain,
Hmm.
but those aren't covered by health insurance today, right? And so they're very expensive. So it's important again to see a physician when there are concerns about memory, to get the proper diagnostic test that is available, so that there could be some intervention or some treatment plan that's compatible with the symptoms that are observed.
Dr. Hill, this whole conversation of, cognitive decline, I mean, it's more than just clinical. It's very personal and it's sensitive. And, you know, um, I know because I've seen it. A lot of times there is resistance among, within the parent themselves because they may be in denial that this is happening. Um, have you, can you speak to that, and how can we respectfully, work with a parent who's just, got that challenge? It's like, I know something is happening to me. I don't want to acknowledge it, but uh,
Yeah, yeah. I tell you, these kinds of conversations are challenging, even when there aren't, memory problems. I have a older adult mom, and we're really having good discussions about how she's continuing to age, but sometimes they can be challenging. Family members, we play an important role, because we are often the first to notice, signs of cognitive decline in a loved one. And unfortunately, many of us are reluctant to broach the subject because we always want to remember, our loved one, our parent, our aunt and uncle, in the ways that, we best remember them. And this can be especially challenging if you're worried, that your family member will be upset or react poorly, when you raise the sensitive topic. But, as difficult as it may be, it is critical that families discuss cognitive concerns as soon as possible. It's important to identify what is causing cognitive changes. Some causes of the cognitive decline are treatable, including, let's say, for example, depression
mm,
or sleep problems, side effects from various medicines or certain vitamin deficiencies. So even if the cause is something more serious, hopefully not Alzheimer's or another dementia, early diagnosis offers the best opportunity for care management and treatment. And so before having a conversation, talk to other family members to share your concerns. Ask if others are noticing the same signs that you see, and anticipate that some family members may dismiss, the changes to the person that's just they're just getting older. Yeah, mom is just getting older. And also keep in mind that sometimes spouses often cover for one another.
mm.
So still, it's best to trust your gut and raise concerns if you suspect that there is a potential problem. Discuss who is best to have the conversation and choose someone your family member trusts and is likely to listen to. So, overall, it's best to be honest and compassionate. Start by sharing some of the things you've noticed and asking if your loved one is also concerned. So, for example, you may say, Mom, I've noticed you're having a hard time making holiday cookies this year, and I'd like to talk to you about what may have happened. You may have been making them for years, and it's this is just not like you. Focus on the specifics. Share them in a way you think your loved one, your family member will be able to hear it, and let them know, most importantly, that you've got their back throughout the entire process. And if this first attempt doesn't go as well as you would have liked, take time to regroup. Maybe jot down some notes and try a different time of the day, or recruit someone else to talk to your loved one, perhaps a different family member, a friend, or someone at church or faith community. You can also share your concerns with your loved ones, doctor. But it's important to have that conversation. And while there's no easy way to have this conversation, it's important to always know that there are resources, and the Alzheimer's Association offers conversation tips at alz.org to help families. I would encourage your 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 listeners and viewers to really engage our website. There's a wealth of information there.
And I'm putting that for those of us catching this on the video replay. I'm putting the website URL. It's www.alz.org/volunteer. Visit the website. There's just tons of information on there. And I'll put that up again during our conversation. Dr. Hill, and thank you so much for that very thoughtful and just sensitive response to the question, because one of the things that I seek to do, at least in estate planning, is to get us, particularly in our community, to really normalize the conversations around estate planning and all of the issues. I look at things holistically. So all the health issues, the finance issues. Let's start having, the dinner table conversations about these issues. And mental health, cognitive decline, that is yet another opportunity, I would say, that we have as a community to start weaving those into our, regular conversations, and not just wait until there's a crisis and then, you've got to learn all this information, and as the Brits say, they're caught on the back foot, because there's so much information out there. And that's what at least I'm hoping to do, that you and I on this podcast talking about these issues, and hopefully it'll spur conversations in various households. You mentioned that because the Alzheimer's Association, it has so much. I mean, it's been well-known association for many years. What are some of the efforts that the association is undertaking to find a cure for this disease?
Well, I tell you, as the largest nonprofit funder of Alzheimer's research, and so I came from the National Institutes of Health, and so that's a large funder of research. But the Alzheimer's Association is the largest nonprofit funder of Alzheimer's research. Tremendous opportunity. The association is committed to accelerating the global progress of new treatments, preventions, and ultimately a cure by undertaking a multitude, many different diverse research initiatives. The association funds independent researchers through our International Research Grants Program. Right, so these are when people like me go on and earn a PhD and are starting a career in research, looking for seed money to start a laboratory or a research program. The Alzheimer's Association funds these investigators, right? Really important. So, currently the association is investing over $310 million in more than 950 research projects in 48 countries all over the world, right? So our grants have funded some of the most instrumental research in Alzheimer's and dementia science. You asked a question earlier about being able to diagnose, Alzheimer's, and I mentioned PET scan, the ability to take pictures of the brain to see, amyloid, one of the proteins that causes the plaques that characterizes Alzheimer's. I won't get too sciencey, but that innovation, came from a pilot grant that was funded through the Alzheimer's Association International Research Grant Program, right? And that investigator went on to receive larger grants from NIH, but really got the seed funding from the Alzheimer's Association. So we're really proud of our ability to fund early career investigators all throughout their career. We also host premier global forums for Alzheimer's and dementia scientists to connect across various disciplines. The best science, is made when people share their findings and they critique each other and they network and they form teams and they push the scientific envelope. So we have the largest scientific conference in this area, the Alzheimer's Association's international conference, which happens every year to bring the scientists together. So we're stimulating through funding research and also convening researchers to come together around these very important issues.
When we talk about, and I know you certainly address it in your speaking engagements and lectures and so forth, disparity in treatment of Alzheimer's disease. Does it run along racial, ethnic lines? And if so, what do your findings, what do your research show? I mean, how does that look like? Is there questions that are not being asked on a practical level?
Really, it's really interesting because we know that Black African Americans are 2 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's or another dementia when compared to whites. But we're also thinking about the determinants, right? And so it's not just about the disparity, but it's about the risk. The factors that would put people at risk, and whether Black African Americans are more likely to have to deal with those risks, right? And so we know Black African Americans are less likely to be diagnosed, less likely to be recruited to participate in research. And it's important to have the opportunity to participate in the clinical trial means you have access to some of the latest treatments that are being evaluated for effectiveness and safety, right? And so to get in the clinical trial is really important, right? And so African Americans are less likely to be recruited, and then also less likely to have access to care and support services, right? And so less likely to take advantage of all of the free resources that we have at the Alzheimer's Association. And so the disparity, yes, African Americans 2 times more likely, but not being able to access care and support, to not be recruited and to participate in clinical trials, this is unacceptable, and it must change.
Dr. Hill, is the onus on the primary care physician to suggest, look, Jane Doe, you might be a good candidate for this trial? Because honestly, as a layperson, I would have no idea that these trials are even going on. So who bears the responsibility to I guess shepherd more people, more diverse candidates into these trials?
I think we all do. I think that the healthcare provider, whether that be the primary care provider or a neurologist, has a role to play in making, in this case, Black African Americans aware of opportunities to participate in clinical trials. But we're talking about research, clinical research, and so investigators, researchers who receive grant funding from the Alzheimer's Association or from the National Institutes of Health, they also have a responsibility to do the type of community engagement, to make people aware of the benefits of participating in a clinical trial. And we know, there's some stigma around participating in research in the Black community.
Well-founded.
Absolutely. Well-founded.
Yeah.
Stigma. Absolutely. So, we have to do our part to make sure that our community, understands what protections, have been put in place, since those times when we know about the Tuskegee syphilis study and other bioethics atrocities, and to to really showcase individuals from our community that have participated and benefited from their participation in the clinical trial. And all of that, I think, is really linked to sustained community engagement, maybe even participatory community engagement, where we work with trusted organizations in our community, so that we can deliver information about Alzheimer's or dementia, opportunities to participate in clinical trials in ways that are culturally relevant, and appropriate. Yeah.
Does the Alzheimer's Association, I guess, as part of their outreach, do they work with, maybe faith-based groups, sororities, fraternities? Is there that kind of engagement to help facilitate the outreach?
All of the above. I tell you, also yes, yes. So we have a strong partnership with the African Methodist Episcopal Church. They'll have over 2 million members across the country, and our North Star is being able to link, one of our 75 chapters around the country with a few of their AME churches in cities where there are high numbers of Black African Americans, and so
Right.
being able to link together at a community level, which is many times different by city, by community, the ways in which these organizations can work together. But that gives us that opportunity to really move into communities in a trusted way. Partnership takes time, right? We're also working with my fraternity, the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And so if we could get the bros to, in the chapters and communities to work with the Alzheimer's Association chapters, again, it gives us a real opportunity to relay our resources, deliver our resources in a way that could be effective. And so, to your viewers, if you know of an organization that has a community, a footprint in Black African American communities, please let us know, because we're willing to do the work to engage and to develop that trust. Because before linking up to go out in the community to do anything, organizations have to know that we're trustworthy, and that takes time. But once we're able to head in that direction, I tell you the opportunities for us to deliver on the Alzheimer's Association mission, to get our information to all communities, is certainly apparent. But also the opportunity to be effective, right? To not just provide information in a way that we think it could be received, but to really work with organizations that will give us that confidence that we're being culturally relevant and appropriate.
That's wonderful, because I personally know of not only clients but friends that are members of the D9, and each one of those organizations has, part of their mission, that community service, that education and empowerment, that they're also known for. What are particular resources that the Alzheimer's Association has available that people can, anybody watching can go and access right now?
Well, we offer free education, both online and in person with one of our chapters, that are, in many times in your community, very close to where you live. We also have a community resource finder, right? And that can help families and care providers find local residential care options by simply entering your zip code, right? Really, really important, right? So you can see you almost map the services that are in your area. And then, as always, the Alzheimer's Association is wonderful 24/7, and I would add 365 days a year helpline. Is 800-272-3900. I'll repeat that again. 1-800-272-3900 is available every day of the year and can help families navigate a variety of disease-related issues. And so, I would just urge everyone to visit alz.org to take a look at some of the resources we have available for you.
And I believe that number that you just mentioned is prominently displayed on the website. So as soon as you hit the website, you'll see that number. I understand that the Alzheimer's Association also has a presence on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So your organization is out there on social media, meeting people where they are and how the many ways that they consume information. But the one-stop shop, I would say, is the www.alz.org website. Dr. Hill, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and this can go in so many different directions. But the reason I wanted you on is really it's about awareness, and one conversation at a time, one interview at a time. That's what I'm hoping to do with this podcast. And I just want to thank you so much for your expertise, everything that you're doing in the community, and just in your career. And I also want to thank, because you're here on behalf of the Alzheimer's Association, I just want to thank them for being gracious enough to take part in this, and to continue the good work that they're doing, continue that outreach. Is there any other final comments that you'd like to make to the viewers, just about any new events that are happening with the Alzheimer's Association, or just anything else about the podcast?
Yeah, I would just echo, your statement. The Alzheimer's Association, really should get all the credit. Really focusing in on community, physically staying in community, and we know we have our work cut out for us. I mean, we've got to do more in Black African American communities, but we understand that, and we're looking to partner with organizations that can help us, do just that. And so I'm excited about this opportunity, this challenge, and really looking for partners to help us, meet this challenge. And those partners could be national organizations or individuals, that are looking at this podcast. And so get involved with us, and being involved, means, as you said, Elsa, it doesn't mean waiting until we notice some problems with memory with a loved one. And that is important, but being involved also means that you can volunteer with us. You can let us know about an organization that we should be working with. You can work with our staff that are in communities, as a volunteer, right? So many ways for you to be a part of this conversation, because as you said, Elsa, having these discussions at the dinner table, at the family reunion, at the fraternity and sorority meeting are so important, because in that way we elevate everyone's understanding, education, and awareness about Alzheimer's and dementia. So join us and visit us at alz.org/volunteer.
One last point I just wanted to mention, because you raised it earlier in our conversation, is that this does not have to be a taboo subject. Over 60% are the numbers that you quoted earlier on in our conversation, dealing with Alzheimer's. And the fact is that our population is aging. We are living longer. So we're going to have to, I pray, not only find a cure, but we need to learn more about how this disease appears, what the triggers are, and how to manage it. There's no putting our heads in the sand about this. So, we don't have a choice. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can't ignore it. And we have to really prioritize an early diagnosis. I mean, this is the take home for me, right? And so, getting an early diagnosis, gives our loved ones a chance to access treatment options, or opportunity, as I mentioned, to participate in clinical trials, a chance to just prioritize health, and really elevate emotional and social benefits. And if nothing else, it provides time for families to plan for the future. But in order to do all of that, you have to be able to, recognize the signs and know who to call. And so an early diagnosis is important, but having the resources to know how important that is also fundamental. And again, I would urge your viewers to be involved with us, the Alzheimer's Association, alz.org.
Wonderful. Dr. Hill, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you as a guest on the Wills, Women, and Wealth podcast. Thank you so much for being so gracious with your time. Thank you again to the Alzheimer's Association as well for everything that they do. Everyone, Dr. Carl V. Hill from the Alzheimer's Association. Dr. Hill, thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Attorney Elsa Smith. Thank you.
Everyone, wasn't that a phenomenal, informative, and insightful conversation we have with Dr. Hill? And I encourage you to share this podcast with those that you know, with the organizations that you are involved with. And, take Dr. Hill up on, his challenge to get involved. Use your organization perhaps as a conduit to get information out to, the communities in your sphere of influence. That's certainly what I'm trying to do with this podcast. I want to thank each of you for listening, watching the Wills, Women, and Wealth podcast. Until next time, this is your Maryland attorney, Elsa W. Smith, wishing you well. Take care.